That's the unfortunate tragedy of what is coming. It's been a curse of mine forever in that I'm always early. Most of what we've talked about as a company has come true. What's really freaking me out, honestly, truthfully, is the speed at which the things that I've been talking about for 3 years
Yeah.
is now happening. And it's actually kind of frightening to me and saddening at the same time because I'm more convicted than ever that it's happening. And as we look at what that means to this country, to the world my children and your daughter are growing up in, it's a scary thought, and it makes me sad. Now, I will never count out the American spirit, especially when our backs are against the wall, but this is something that none of us have ever had to deal with, and that is the end of an era of dollar supremacy.
Connection established.
Welcome back, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Silver Stacking Podcast. It is Silver Slayer, and we are here with Andy Shectman, the CEO of Miles Franklin, one of the most respected dealers out there. If you want to purchase from Andy, send an email to info@milesfranklin.com. Let him know I sent you. It helps me out. It helps you out as well. Anyways, Andy, what's going on? Anything new you want to talk about?
Oh, there's there's so much going on, man. It's I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah.
But that's one of the one of the things that excuse me has me really most intrigued and or concerned, if you will, about what's happening is the speed in which it's happening. You know, I the first time you and I did a show and on several subsequent episodes, we've talked about this thesis that I've had for 3 years when no one was talking about it. That being this movement of these nations against the West, this coalition of countries rallying against the Western hypocrisy and hegemony to de-dollarize, to stand up on their own, and emanating from the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa, the formation of the Belt Road Initiative, 150 plus countries working towards the greatest infrastructure project ever attempted, connecting Asia, Africa, South America, and Europe. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union, these entities that comprise 85% of human population. When I started talking about them in 2020, my thesis started with the repatriation of the gold by the central banks, the massive accumulation. The following year, the reclassification of gold as a tier one reserve asset. The following year, the Belt Road Initiative, the IMF saying they wanted a new Bretton Woods. But the theme here is that this progression of events was just that, a linear progression of events that was taking place, 2 or 3 of these events per year. 2 or 3 of these very strong, major, important events that were being ignored by the mainstream, but that caught my eye. In and of themselves, these events may not have had much significance in the greater picture. But for some reason, as clearly as I was able to see the back of my hand, I could see what all of these events had in common. And that's what was being missed by not only the mainstream, but also the alternative media. And that is this trend towards de-dollarization, towards standing up on their own 2 feet against the Western hegemony. It became very clear to me very quickly. And what has me the most concerned about all of this is the speed at which in which it is accelerating. And, you know, since we've last talked, several very key things have happened, such as our allies to the south, Mexico, formally applying to BRICS, such as Saudi Arabia formally applying to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is also a military organization, not just financial and economic. You're talking 60% of the Eurasian landmass is in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization run by China. when you realize Saudi Arabia is being protected on one end by Russia and now on the other end by the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it essentially means China and Africa or South Africa. You have a growing chorus of things happening, or our friends, our allies, France, who was right there with us in 2022 in backing the sanctioning of Russia, in weaponizing the dollar and accelerating all of these events, kicking them out of SWIFT, taking their funds, using them to rebuild the Ukraine, all of the things that really we shouldn't be able to do as the custodian of the world's reserve.
Right.
And that's what's accelerating it. But now France last week signs a very large liquid natural gas deal with UAE and China to be payable in yuan. Bad enough, President Macron just returned from a trip with China and Xi Jinping. And as he was leaving the last day, he signs a 51-point joint declaration with the Chinese, ranging from, get this, 5G to military engagement. Our allies, like Mexico, like Saudi Arabia, like Turkey, like Egypt, and now like France, are slowly exiting stage left. They are choosing sides. The comments by Macron were shocking, as far as I'm concerned, where he told the world that few things. One in particular was that that Europe really can't do anything about the war in the Ukraine. So what makes anyone think that they should be involved with getting in between Taiwan and China? In fact, he urged those leaders in Europe to distance themselves from this event, to pull away from America, as they don't want to get in between the conflict between China and Taiwan. They're already put in the middle of the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, and there's nothing they can do about it. He went on to say that not just countries, but corporations and banks within the European Union are complaining about the Western sanctions, that a bank like the one in France that was fined about $4 billion for trading with an Iranian company can be sanctioned based upon falling on the wrong side of the West's agenda. These are the kind of things that represent the rallying cry to the portion of the world that is de-dollarizing, but to see it happening with our allies right in front of us is another. And when you see Mexico and France make these admissions, it's very, very shocking. Or how about the Kenyan president a week ago, who said, we're going to buy oil from the United Arab Emirates and from Saudi Arabia and pay for it in Kenyan shillings, and then standing on the stage saying to all of his countrymen, those of you who hold dollars need to do what you're going to do or experience losses, because in the next few weeks this whole market will be different. Now, what the hell does that mean?
Right.
The point I'm getting at is that, like a roll of toilet paper is the analogy I make. You put a fresh roll of toilet paper out, you don't notice how it's decreasing in volume when it's fresh. But as it gets closer to the end, it spins faster and the cardboard becomes more visible.
Yeah.
And I would argue the cardboard is becoming more visible outside the country. The trend moving away from the dollar, protecting themselves, that being Saudi Arabia, on both sides with China and Russia, the agreements that are being made, like the negotiated peace agreement China brokered between Iran and Saudi Arabia, Sunni and Shiite, countries that have hated each other for centuries, are now rallying against a common enemy or foe, that being the United States. My enemy's enemy is my friend.
Yeah.
Enough to put those things aside, that the roll is spinning much faster. And the ramifications of de-dollarization and of losing the petrol reserve status become greater and greater and greater by the day. And of course, when you look at the boneheaded monetary policy of the Fed and these ridiculous fiscal policy of the Treasury and the government, are accelerating the motivation and the desire to de-dollarize. The lighting of a fuse underneath the regional banks in this country, 5,000 of them, which hold 70% of all of these small business loans in this country, the majority of all the commercial real estate loans in this country, not the big skyscrapers that JP and Citi and Morgan Stanley would hold or back, but most of the commercial real estate, which has been getting hammered due to everyone working remotely now, the banks that hold the paper on this are being eviscerated from the inside out. We have not seen the end of this banking crisis. It is just beginning. And what does that mean? When everyone flows out of these banks because the commercial banks are paying 5 or 6% in money markets, while the CDs that are systemic and risky and will not be bailed out, according to the Treasury Secretary, unless they are systemic enough, whereby an uber majority of the FOMC, that's the Fed, the FDIC, Janet Yellen and the president agree that they're worthy of being bailed out. That's making everyone freak the hell out. We've added 12,000 new clients in 30 days in the banking system. The regional banks has watched over $1 trillion leave in 1 week.
Yeah,
All
rightfully
the way
so.
into a handful of commercial banks. This is a very scary backdrop. And I think it is very important that people understand that the time to de-dollarize, the time to do what the biggest money in the world is doing, is fading away. And I just think people need to take a real close look at what's going on. The time for cost averaging and waiting for a pullback is coming to an end. Premiums are starting to spike again, like we talked about. I told you they would, when during Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, they all collapsed. Everyone was out hugging grandma and traveling without worrying about a pandemic. They were enjoying the holidays for the first time in 3 years in a way that they hadn't since 2020, in coordination with all the 2023 allocations. Premiums are now going up. Supply is now drawing down. And when you add into the mix Missouri, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Tennessee, Idaho, Alaska, these are states that are all talking about adding gold and silver to their state treasuries. And not only that, using it for debts, public and private. And Texas is going as far as talking about issuing a digital gold-backed settlement currency. These are signs of a mass awakening.
Would that be just for Texas?
Yes. I don't know if it would move into other states. They would have to adopt it as settlement. But did you ever play the game Jenga when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah.
You pull blocks out one at a time, and the last person pulls the block out that makes the tower fall.
Yeah.
Each one of these things I just mentioned is another block. The Kenyan president saying, I'm going to pay for oil in Kenyan shillings is one block in and of itself. Wouldn't really mean a lot until it's the last block that tumbles the whole tower.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't, but it's a block. What will be that block that makes it all fall over? And it's coming. That I know. Having the ability to come on your show and others and talk about it is very important to me. And I appreciate our relationship very much, and your open mind and that of your listeners. And what used to be me, the only one talking about this, now everyone is, including Fox and CNN, like they're on something new. But what everyone is ignoring, they're talking about the problem. They're ignoring the
solution, or
not only the
alternative,
solution, ultimate outcome. And the ultimate outcome is the loss of the World Reserve Standard. And what does that look like? And this is why I think you're seeing, not only did the central banks buy the second most gold in history in 2022, more so than in any time since 67. If you look at the January numbers, they're up 196% month over month from December. They're doubling down. So the big money, whether it be draining the exchanges, not just of gold and silver, but of aluminum and copper and zinc and all of the soybeans and wheat and anything that is a commodity, soft or hard, is leaving in terms of deliveries, the exchanges, the COMEX and the LBMA. But also the massive amount of central bank purchases. It's just, it should be a wake-up call that the biggest money in the world isn't just the biggest money. When you reach that level of wealth, you also are in circles closest to the information. And that, I think, is giving away or betraying the price suppression, which, by the way, they're using to run cover for de-dollarization, because the leverages offer roughly 30 times or greater leverage, where $1 controls 30, where 1 million controls 30 million, where 1 billion controls 30 billion. On the COMEX, painting a perception of reality is not difficult for central banks and commercial banks, who can suppress the metals price with great leverage, buy the physical when no one's looking because they're too obsessed with the price, and then papering it over. We've talked about price being a tool of misdirection. This is all accelerating. And that's what I see happening. And a trend in motion is a trend you need to pay attention to, because it's not only in motion, it's gaining momentum.
Yeah, this is all inevitable. I swear every single day something else comes out. Like, I never have to worry about running out of video ideas because I just look online and something else comes out. And back about 3-4 years ago, it really wasn't like that at all. Like, I would have trouble like sometimes finding news to cover. But yeah, it's that domino effect. It's like, and it is good for silver stackers, right? We get a pretty penny, but at what cost? If you look at the aftermath,
Good that you
like,
said that. I said that in an earlier interview today. I said my success comes at the expense of everyone around me who I love and care about.
yeah,
And there's an interesting statement when I was speaking at Robert Kiyosaki's event last week, and he talked about Buckminster Fuller, someone who was a mentor to him, and very interesting guy. As I started researching him, very, very interesting man. But one quote that he had that made great sense to me is that people can't get out of the way of what they don't see coming. You talk about having to look for information to talk about, yet the information that you're finding or talking about, you have to dig for. And they may have a little snippet in Reuters or Bloomberg or whatnot, but I would venture to say that's not where the majority of your information
right.
comes from. And so most people don't see what's coming unless they know the Silver Slayer or know me or the several of us in the industry that stand out on a limb,
Yeah.
say this stuff that is very, very unimportant to most people. I want to read to you. This is one small email. It's one line. I got a kick out of it. I just got it today. And I'm not going to mention his name.
Okay.
But he says, well, he doesn't. His name is Scott. And if you're listening, Scott, I got a kick out of it. Mr. Shectman, I'm 17 and my parents think that there is nothing to worry about in the near future. What should I do?
Wow.
That's the point.
That's
Scott
awesome.
is coming, but most people don't, including his parents.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate tragedy of what is coming. The little boy who cried wolf, that'd be me and you. We've been crying for a long time because, as you said, it's inevitable. But the wolf comes the last page of the book.
Yeah.
And are we growing closer to that last page? Well, I'm not really sure how fast the last page comes. It's been a curse of mine forever in that I'm always early. Most of what we've talked about as a company has come true. What's really freaking me out, honestly, truthfully, is the speed at which the things that I've been talking about for 3 years is now happening. And it's gratifying to be right especially when you're saying this on YouTube in front of thousands and thousands or millions of people to go back and see. It's been the only thing I've talked about for 3 years. And I would apologize to people like you when I'd been on their shows, like Snafu Radio or Liberty and Finance, or some of these shows that I was doing repetitively. And I would apologize and say, look, I know I keep saying the same thing, but I'm telling you, this is happening. It's an important thing. And it's okay, Andy. It's okay. And it's happening. And it's actually kind of frightening to me and saddening at the same time, because I'm more convicted than ever that it's happening. And as we look at what that means to this country, to the world my children and your daughter are growing up in, it's a scary thought, and it makes me sad. Now, I will never count out the American spirit, especially when our backs are against the wall, but this is something that none of us have ever had to deal with, and that is the end of an era of dollar supremacy, of the world reserve status. And the problem is that the distortions that have been created over the last several years due to suppressed interest rates and easy money is going to make this painful. They should have let the house burn or the forest burn in 2008 at the GFC, and the forest would have already been growing back healthy. Instead, they papered it over, and what we will experience when it corrects is far greater than what we would have had they let Mother Nature do her thing. In 08. In 08, the Fed had a balance sheet of 800 billion. It is now 9 trillion. For the last 11 months, they've been talking about quantitative tightening, and they did. They tightened 600-700 billion, meaning they sold treasuries off their balance sheet. In the last 3 weeks, they've added 400 billion back on. They've erased 3/4 of 11 months worth of quantitative tightening in 3 weeks. The game is over. They cannot tighten. They'll break the entire system. So they've chosen what all governments do, inflation. And that will only accelerate the de-dollarization and the ultimate demise of the dollar as the solo world reserve currency. This is important that people wake up. Silver is an opportunity of a generation, of a lifetime. And I mean that to my soul. It is. There is nothing that is more undervalued and more overutilized and decreasing in supply, both above ground and geologically. You could not, on a piece of paper, write down greater fundamentals for an investment. Ever. And you add into it the seriousness of what's happening as a nation and the prospects of where we end up. Man, I'm telling you, you're doing, this is going to sound weird, but I mean it. You're doing God's work. You are. I mean, whether you know it or not, you are helping more people protect themselves and get out of the way of what's coming than most people much older than you and with a much greater platform than you, like Jim Cramer, who all he's doing is destroying people's wealth, telling people to buy Silicon Valley Bank stock at $300 a share. So, you know, sometimes the worm turns. It hasn't fully turned yet. But people like you and I, when this is all said and done, will be revered for sounding the alarm, the Paul Revere, if you will. And I admire you for it, and I admire myself for it, because neither of us need to do what we are doing and being so public about our opinions. And I just think I hope we're making an impact even a little bit. Because in my entire career, almost 34 years, I have never been so concerned, so frightened, and so sad about what I see bearing down upon us. And that's the honest to God truth.
That's the, I think, most interesting thing about this is, like, when I met you, you know, coming on my channel, talking about the bricks and stuff. And it seems like right around that time is when everything just ramped up tenfold. I don't know if it was just because that's right when I got introduced to all this, but it seems like I've known you for what, like 6-7 months. It seems like since then, everything has just come crashing down.
Faster.
Yeah.
It's what toilet paper I'm talking about. It is.
Yeah.
It is. And the crazy thing about it, when you go to the grocery store or when you call your oldest buddies, maybe they watch your show, but the ones that don't, ask them, do you know what the bricks are? No one does. And if it weren't for you, none of them know a silver eagle if it fell on their foot either.
Yeah.
So this country, albeit is waking up little by little, is very woefully underprepared for what's coming. And that's the most frightening thing about it, is that you and I speak to what is the pimple on the elephant's ass. And the elephant is whistling Dixie, worrying about the former President Trump being indicted, which is atrocious to me.
Right.
The fact that that happened, that's worthy of consideration, but it's far less important than what is really coming down. It's just another symptom of the sickness.
And he explained it in his speech. he explained what the state of America. He said we're about to be a third world country. He's
We
like
meddle with the elections.
like
This is meddling, whether you believe it or not. When you indict on bullshit counts the leading Republican candidate because you do not want him ruining the apple cart,
right,
that's meddling, and it's disgusting when you weaponize the Justice Department and the FBI and raid a former president's home at 5 in the morning, yet don't do anything about the president and his son and the myriad of
right.
things that would deem indictment or digging. And it's very frightening. It's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary that this is happening in the United States. This is all emblematic of what is fostering the de-dollarization, the move away from the West. That isn't what it stood for. We're being hollowed out. We are not the country we once were, at least in this administration, we're not. And people can say what they want about Trump. His policies were 1,000 times better than any president I've ever witnessed. Yeah, he spoke like an idiot. So what? I'll take buffoonism way more than I will an administration that is eviscerating the value of the dollar, destroying our relationships with, look at these countries that are our
Right.
allies. Saudi Arabia, gone.
With Trump,
Mexico, gone. Germany, pissed off at us as can be because of the pipeline and the energy situation. France doing deals with China in yuan and signing 51-point deals, including military engagement. Australia, New Zealand, and Japan rumored to be contemplating joining the BRICS. The world is angry at us.
yeah,
And hopefully not at us American people, but of the administration. And that is creating a very scary environment where you need to think about what happens when the dollar gets dumped. But if you're going to dump dollars and you're going to stop taking it for oil the way Libya and Iraq did, and you know what happened to their leaders, well, you better get your ass covered first. And that's being protected by Russia and now by extension, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They got their back covered. And at some point when they are ready to release that statement on a Sunday night, just like Silicon Valley Bank Monday morning, everything was upside down. They'll do it on a Sunday night. Hey, thanks for the memories. We're moving on. We're taking another currency. Bang, all the dollars get dumped globally and they collapse. And the ramifications of that is something no one has thought about. And when that happens, it's a religious experience.
Trump said that in his speech. It like specifically said that. And I guarantee 95% of people that heard that, it went straight over their head, just thinking it's all BS. But I did want to ask something, because we're talking about all these other countries. What's left of the G7?
Well, you got us in Canada. I mean, that's and the United Kingdom. Japan is talking about
they switched.
They haven't fully switched, but they're talking about it.
Yeah.
You got Australia, they're talking about it.
Right. So we only Mike.
I mean, a lot of the 7 is disappearing.
Yeah, so it's just Canada, basically.
Well, I mean, and I guess Switzerland. I mean, you got countries in there, but it'll be a smattering of countries.
Yeah,
that will be left isolated to what will be an entirely new ecosystem.
Yeah. Do you think
one that is all about transparency, a la blockchain, and commodities that are pegged to the blockchain?
Do you think if Trump did get back in office, he could fix this?
I think he'd have a better chance of fixing it than anyone because he would do the things that needed to be done.
Yeah.
And when he was in office, we had good relationships with North Korea. We had good relationships with China. Granted, there were sanctions or not sanctions, tariffs. They were dealing with them appropriately. They respected us. We had good relationship with Russia. We did what needed to be done to put America first. We were energy independent. We had low inflation and high employment. Stock market was doing well. Look, you could argue we're so far down the rabbit hole that this is really beyond repair.
Yeah, that's
the U.S. government came out with their balance sheet a few weeks ago, 2022. Social Security is $77 trillion filled with IOUs, 77 trillion by their own admission, 76.9 or something like that. I always like the number a trillion seconds ago being 31,688 years ago. When you add that unfunded liability of 77 trillion to the other unfunded liabilities, unfunded, off balance sheet obligations, Medicare, Medicaid, government, military pensions, you're $120 trillion on top of a $31 trillion debt. They came out and told us that the largest asset of the land of the free and the home of the brave is student debt. And you could argue that we're so far down the rabbit hole economically, financially, there may not be a solution but a reset. But what Trump did was demand respect and accountability, which is lacking right now in this country. And that's a scary thing. I think Trump may have been tough, but I think we were respected, and now we are not respected at all, which is, again, only giving courage to these entities to expedite, if you will, the formation of this massive union of countries that represent the majority of human population, to get it finalized before the administration changes. So unfortunately, I don't think that there's really any way to fix the problem that we have, only to mitigate the severity of the fallout.
Yeah, I always tell people that too. There's no solution to this problem. There's an alternative, which is precious metals, but yeah, we're too deep in the hole. I mean,
you know what, man? The truth of it is this, and I think this is the most important thing I could say on this show. In what is coming, which I believe will be a hyperinflationary stagflation, the Great Depression meets the printing press. That is what I think is coming. He or she who loses least wins. Get out of the way of what's coming. Get out of debt if you can, especially variable rate debt. Prepare food, water, protection for your family, things that you would need if a hurricane was coming. Buy a few ounces of silver, or as much as you can, every few weeks. Do what you can to prepare as if a hurricane is coming, and this is going to be a hell of a hurricane, in my opinion. And that's all that you can really do. And if you have greater means financially, then get the hell out of the dollar, get out of traditional assets, because when rates spike in relation to that event, those assets collapse. That's the reset. That is the reset. And I think we're growing closer to the inevitability of that happening than ever before.
I want to stick with Texas and all these states that are going, trying to bring back the gold standard. I think that's very interesting, and I want to see how that plays out. I don't see how that's possible, especially you said they're thinking about making a digital currency with it.
How is it that Colorado and California and all these states are allowed to sell marijuana when it's federally illegal?
That's true.
The states make their own rules. And despite the Fed, and this is another example of it, the states will have their own forms of legal tender. It's not like they're outlawing the dollar, and I don't know how the federal government will feel about it, but they're doing it. And it's being passed. I mean, in Missouri and Wyoming and Texas and Idaho and Kansas.
That's crazy.
It's on happening. So what that symbolizes more than anything is the awakening. Where the representative from Idaho stands on the legislature floor and says, we need to let our constituents do what the central banks are doing. They're selling dollars and buying metal. I mean, when have you ever heard that before? Representative Mooney from
Robert Mooney.
Yeah, who keeps trying to introduce gold and silver as legal tender and no taxes on gains and all of that stuff. There is an awakening, and that's what it will take to, if we have any hope of digging ourselves out. There was a report issued by the International Monetary Fund a month or two ago that was titled "Gold, a Gold and International Reserve Currency, a Barbarous Relic No More?" ? The IMF is 150 countries, where it's kind of like the Western form of the BRICS, so to speak. Not really, but kind of. This was formed at Bretton Woods, and the U.S. has veto power there. I think they control like 17 or 20%. But maybe that's how they fight back against the massive shift out of the dollar as they issue a gold-backed digital Fed token or digital dollar. I'm not exactly sure how it plays out, but
Yeah.
I do think that that's on the table. Did you know that "May you live in interesting times" is a Chinese curse?
Really?
That's a
What
statement.
is
"May you live in interesting times" is a
Yeah,
Chinese.
you mentioned that last episode, I think, or something,
It's a
wasn't it?
Chinese curse. That's how they.
Yeah,
In other words, I prefer dull and complacent.
yeah,
These are interesting, and with that
yeah.
comes the fallout of interesting. I don't really have any last parting words for anyone. I think I've been very transparent
Yeah.
for a very long time.
Yeah,
I think you are not buying this to get wealthy. It is wealth. It
right.
is wealth that has outlived everything the world's ever thrown at it, and they're throwing a big curveball at us right now.
Yeah,
And I think that's why you buy gold and silver. It's not to get rich. It's because if you are stuck in traditional assets and in dollars, you're destined to go broke.
yeah,
If you are not a contrarian, you're destined to become a villain. I mean, a villain, a victim. That's a Freudian slip. If you're not a contrarian, you'll be a victim. And like I said, if you don't see what's coming, you can't get out of the way of it. Open your eyes and look and see. And that's what I've always attempted to do on your show and others, and be the Paul Revere, if you will, sound the alarm. You're doing a good job of it as well. And I appreciate the opportunity to come on here
yeah,
and do this. As I mentioned to you off air, I'm somehow going to attempt to write a book with Robert Kiyosaki over the next few weeks. So I will be a little sparse over the next few weeks. I'm not going anywhere. I will be back. If something crazy happens, I'm a phone call away and we'll jump on a
right.
podcast in 10 seconds. But let's just say sometime towards the beginning of summer, I'll be back, hopefully with a book in hand and
That'd be really
talk about
cool.
all the things that have been going on in the world.
Yeah, I'll be hitting 100,000 subscribers around then too, like month and a half, 2 months, something like that. So
Well, you
yeah,
deserve it. And
exciting things.
everyone listening should send these videos and others that you do out to their friends and get the word out.
Yeah,
You can only help the world or save the world one person at a time, starting
yeah,
with yourself. But most of the people listening to your show have already got that covered. Now
yeah.
work with some of your immediate family and see what you can do there. Just like the young man Scott, who said,
That
"What
was
do I
so
do? My
cool.
parents are oblivious." So what do? You do the best you can, hope for the best, and do all you can to prepare for the worst.
Yeah. All right, guys, if you did want to purchase some of this shiny stuff, send an email to info@milesfranklin.com. Let them know Silver Slayer sent you. Helps me out. It'll help you out as well. Just ask what their inventory is. Get a price sheet. If you have any questions, they're always there. You don't have to be shy. Andy's very helpful. It's happened numerous times where someone will email me with a question, and I'll reach out to Andy. So buying from them is kind of like buying from your friend compared to just some random site online. And I think that's one of the coolest things about this.
I've told you, and thank you for your kind words. Every one of the brokers who works for me, every one, except for one, who was a friend of my dad's, every one of them are some of my oldest friends in the world. I mean, real friends, not just work friends, friends
Right.
that I've known since Little League, since elementary school, since junior high, since high school, since college. Friends that I would hang out and associate with if business never came into the fold. And there are those people who say you should never work with your friends. I vehemently disagree. You just have to pick the right friends,
Yeah.
because it's important to know that people working with you and for you have your back and that of your company. And my friends do. And that to me is the greatest comfort. So we are a big family, and we do
Yeah.
try to make it seem like we're all friends. The relationships are important. You know what?
Yeah.
Where we're heading, relationships will be very important.
Yeah.
You or these people who we work with call up, they will have made relationships. And that means for something and stands for something. And it does with me and everyone in my company. So thank you for your vote of confidence, for your
Yeah.
endorsement. That means a great deal to me, and I'll always have your back as well. So until next time, I'll look forward to picking up where we left off. But I hope everyone out there stays well. These are crazy times, and
Yeah.
like you just said, may we all live in interesting times.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. This was Silver Slayer. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.